Okay, Maxime, the floor is yours.
Okay. So today the topic is serious programming games. So today I will first introduce what's considered programming knowledge and what the games that I will talk about later usually try to teach. Then I will talk about some education factors and adaptability of some games and how to build them, and some points about evaluation of a programming game that can be also applied to basically every serious games. So it might be a little bit redundant with what we've seen last week, but I think it's relevant and relevant for the paper discussion as well. So that's why. And we'll see some game examples. So first of all, programming knowledge. So there is several points to it. First, the first point is algorithm and design. So, for example, how to compare different algorithms in terms of complexity and efficiency, and how much line of code it contains, for example. And also one point is solve problems. So that's very broad, but that's usually what serious games tends to do, because it's easier to apply the field of programming into problem solving in a game. There's also all the programming concepts, so the syntax, the variables, the expressions, loops, recursion, all the basic stuff of programming. Of the basic tools you have to write code efficiently. Also, some of the games provide information and introduce some data structure. So we'll see, for example, the paper we will discuss about the CMX game. They focused on array data structure and array-oriented problems. And also some games will try to raise awareness about some development methods, so how to understand program comprehension, some debugging strategies. They provide some feedback about what the user will enter when will code actually in the game. They can provide some hints about how to do the documentation of the code properly, how to structure the code properly, and even some testing, why not. And the last point, it's very rare to see in a serious game. I haven't found any example of that, but I still wanted to mention it. Is how to do the software design. For example, would you want to code in object-oriented programming or not, or stuff like that. So the second point is education factor, and the most important education factor is age, because if you want to learn students to code, or people in general, you won't do the same thing if they are young children between 5 and 13, if they are in high school, or if they are undergraduate or even graduate. You won't teach them the same way. And same goes with programming experience. You won't introduce coding to someone the same way if they don't know anything about programming or if they already have some experience about it. So that's why adaptability. So it's based on a paper I found in my research. It was about how to adapt some games to make them basically adapt to the most users and the most number of people and the most diverse skill set they have. So you already know about scaffolding, we already talked about, which is the fact that the difficulty of the complexity of the game will increase step by step, depending to provide a challenging experience to the user. But in the paper that is referenced there, they talk about competence-based knowledge-based theory, which is it's very simple. It's just instead of increasing difficulty, they will just have a list of competence or task that the user know how to do or can't do. And it will adapt the difficulty of the game depending on what the game knows the user can do and can't do. So, and for example, here's one example on how to adapt the difficulty of the game. So first you do some training tasks to try to understand what the user is capable of. And based on that you have a player model which is trying to approximate his level in programming, for example. And you provide the player with some tasks and measure its performance on it. And then you update the model to try to have the most accurate experience and to have the right level of challenge and complexity to the game. So, how to evaluate the serious games? So we already talked about that last week, so we'll do this quickly. But how? So we have gameplay statistics using metrics. You can have skill tests. You can do an interview. You can do direct feedback, expert feedback about the game. You can distribute a survey. And what's very important is on what criteria do you want to evaluate it. So first, you want to know if the feedback is positive about the game. Do the players enjoy it? That's very important if you want the game to be successful. Next is accessibility. So how hard it is to understand, how easy to use it, and yeah, is it understandable basically. Then user engagement, that goes with motivation, and learning effect. So at what point the game is trying to have some learning effect on the user. And you can group that in those points: usability, motivation, engagement, experience, and adaptability. And so that's based on another paper that I sourced later. And here's the points that are very important when you want to evaluate a game. So yeah, I talked about the learning outcomes, the bugs of the game, of course, playability, motivation. You can split that into how challenging and how much enjoyment players get out of it, how curious they are about the game, and how is the desire to learn and the immersion in the game. Then in terms of engaging, so you must have engaging goals, simple goals, and a great scenario. And yeah, how the user is doing the decision is very important too. They must feel in control of the game and not just the game telling them what to do. And another point is, do you want to have social interaction to the game? It can be good to have some kind of leaderboard to compete between the players and know which one have the most points, has more problem solved, and so that encourages participation for the user. And yeah, last point, understandability, clarity, simplicity, and so on. And independence, last point, because if the user needs someone to tell him how to use it, how to use the game, and what to do on the game, then there is no point to have a game. So yeah, so that's the paper I used to have all those criteria. And here's a simple diagram that sum it up.
Simple, hang on. Moment. Same classroom?
Like it's quite visual. What are the
yeah. Very comprehensive.
Yeah.
Just a question on, just because we are in the context now, sorry to interrupt you a bit, but in terms of adaptability, right, the serious game, what kind of metrics or ways of adapting to the user have you found, right? Is it just skill level basically, or because you mentioned just before desire to learn and immersion, so how do you measure that, right? So from for a given user, especially in programming, I mean.
think desire to learn, you can measure that by measuring how long the player is playing in one session. And so the more the player is playing in one time, basically the more motivated they are. I think that could be one point. Yeah, or also using surveys or online. Yeah.
So, but
after.
if you have for example, the duration of interaction with the tool, right?
Yeah.
It could be two ways. Either the user is really interested, or the user is interested but unskilled. Right. So you're just spending a lot of time to get stuff done, but your immersion is not broken, which is good. But it doesn't necessarily point to well, what does it tell you about the user? That's my question, right? It could be that's a very high skilled but immersed user, or very low skilled but engaged user, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering mostly if there's any pointer in the literature, of how they differentiate and different, personas, like types of users, if you like, and then adapt to them, if there's anything like that.
I think you can also measure that by knowing how much task they complete at a certain time.
So that would be the gameplay metrics that you highlighted before, right? So yeah.
I think it would be that.
Interesting. So the thing I want to get at, or at least highlight, is identifying humans' capabilities and interests is like a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it brings all that psychological stuff together. And most likely there will not be one single metric that helps you, but you probably need to combine quite a bit of the metrics, even across the different leaves of the branches that this figure highlights, right? So, and it would be interesting to see how they integrate it, right? So which weights do they use, right? So how important is user experience over motivation, or engagement? I don't know, right? So in fact, engagement and user experience seems to be very overlapping as far as I am concerned, because if you're immersed in something, it generally means that you have a high level of engagement, unless I misread the conception there. So
yeah, I think
it's probably worthwhile if this paper is actually, I'm kind of impressed that you come up with such a comprehensive setup of how to create a serious game and evaluate it. So that's cool. For your report, just bear in mind, just critically review, see if they really clearly delineate the individual aspects, or it's just a flat list of everything they have in their mind, kind of thing, right? But if they differentiate and clarify why engagement is different from user experience, that is fine. It's just something to dig into, because every time I see those really big graphics, it's kind of, I'm always trying to debug, okay, are they really distinctively different? Are they actually disjunct, or are they actually overlapping concepts, right? Because oftentimes you find that, and it would be worthwhile to find out if they admit that some of those characters are overlapping, or if they are seen distinctively as different, and if they're justified in text. Hence my question. But
well, yeah, I know that they detail a lot each point.
Right.
They have 1 or 2 sentences to define them.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was reading it, I thought, yeah, there is definitely some overlapping.
Right. Okay.
And I can't remember if they talk about that in the discussion.
It's more for you in your reflection when you think about it. So you have a critical eye on those things, because it's tricky to do that in the first place, admittedly. So yeah. But cool. Yeah, interesting. Thanks for a simple diagram. Yeah.
So now that's all for the theory I had to present, and I'll show you some examples. So first one is I decided to show it because I found it really interesting. It's very buggy as an example. That's why I decided to show it, because it's very strange. So it's basically designed for children, but I think no children could possibly use it.
Okay.
I'll try to show it. It's on GitHub, but I think it's kind of
cool. So it's executable. You can run it on GitHub itself, on GitHub.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Cool.
And so it's already quite weird as user experience is concerned. So yeah. Very
Oops. Right.
For example, you have some, maybe some way to compare with the first one to try to understand it, and basically they want to learn how to add numbers, but they try with very big numbers, so I don't know why. And they have some weird animation when you try to add things.
Cool.
So yeah, it's very weird.
Okay.
And yeah, the user experience is very, very difficult to understand.
For children, really?
Yeah.
I think that is slightly oddly positioned.
Yeah.
In terms of,
I think it is.
I mean,
you have window popping up everywhere. Some weird thing to stop this.
subtracting. So, so the subtraction, is it implicit because there is no symbolic representation of the subtraction? Right, could be an addition as well. Who would know? Oh, that's an addition.
Yeah,
that's cool. Okay.
And yeah, there are actually a lot of. I don't know. I quickly played it, try to understand it, but yeah, I don't even know what it's doing. So.
Right.
Basically, if I can't understand it, I don't see how people that don't know anything about programming can understand it.
So if you have that kind of game, right, how would you approach the understanding development, irrespective of the interesting UI? What would be a pathway of getting people to understand it, especially in a gamified context?
I think you could have someone to first show the different tools. And
yeah, that's one way.
Maybe let people experience with it after.
Yeah. So, but in games, what do we usually do there?
Tutorials.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So you would have like those, even on a smartphone, if you have apps, right, it asks you click there, right? So it does something, right? Click there, and once you you know your email program or whatever else, right? Same here, right? So they would need to have a kind of mini walkthrough tutorial, whatever you want, what you want to think about, because no one will read that stuff. It's way too much text for intro level, especially for kids. Let alone the language, because another way to subtract is to add a negative number. I mean, sure, no big deal, but for children there is too much complexity in one sentence. So.
But yeah, so that's the first example I found
Interesting,
in
but
a way.
definitely interesting, and precisely what. So in terms, this is numbers, right? But it also does it allow for modeling of algorithms in any way, or which is 2R, right?
Some kind of function word that's supposed to do some tasks.
All right.
I haven't explored this page actually, so yes, I have some.
So basically, it encapsulates mathematical functions of diverse nature. All right, try the bird. Oh, wow. See, that's very straightforward.
Yeah, that's a lot of text.
Any comments on usability? That is cool, and no paragraph, nothing in there. So that's perfect. Okay, but there's a demo there. I always blah blah blah. Retrain parts. Click. So does it do something? Well, it should do something, right? But it's not clear what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, it's not clear at all.
Just fly somewhere, see how it goes. So now you're clicking. All right. Whatever. It's. I don't think
whatever.
we're probably not learning too much, but there's a game.
Yeah, that's and yeah, and so basically I have. That's one of the papers you linked actually that I already found that talks about game review. They had a huge table with a lot of examples of it. And that was the first, and it was categorized for children. So
right, interesting.
Yeah,
that's good for reviewing that. So that's something you want to discuss as well, right? Especially if you find games and you can assess claims that are made about it, right? I agree with you. For children, their complexity is too high, and you probably need to scaffold very carefully, right? So, for example, start with simple mathematical operations before showing me something about sine and cosine, eventually, and function birds. So yeah, interesting.
Anyway, second game, human versus machine.
That looks better.
That's actually published on Steam, and it's very interesting and very fun to play. Basically, you control kind of factory. And the goal is you have some kind of input in some belts on the left here, and yes, I can show it. And you have to program certain tasks using the box that which represent a function, where you have your floor to basically store the boxes. So it's kind of like you store variables on the floor. And you try to order them or put them in another sequence. And they have various examples of it, various problems. And so in the paper I read, they assessed that it was more about problem solving than learn to code. But there is some coding programming stuff with basically the scripting tool on the right there. And they even assess some challenges to the player. For example, for each example, for each task, there is a reward if you can do it in under, for example here 11 of your instructions. So it can also teach the player about optimization and stuff like that. And there is also systems about size and also efficiency. So how much basically time it takes for the algorithm to perform.
Short question: who thinks that's because you mentioned that's more like problem solving in a way? Who thinks that there is a relationship to programming in particular? Yeah. Why is there? Do you see any pattern of what it reminds you of?
Well, the way you put instructions.
Yeah. Yeah.
To tell the.
What does it remind you of? Any abstractly, any programming language that comes to mind?
Yeah, very low level actually.
Yeah. Which one?
Assembly?
Assembly, yeah.
It's precisely that, right? Because that's an opcode and operand, right? Opcode, operand. Yeah, okay, here's an abstraction here because you say copy from. No, actually, it's exactly. It's a memory representation. It's there as well. So it's probably actually super intensely in terms of programming. It's just not. So it boils down to the authors again, seeing what programming language they know and used to, right? But if you want to teach assembly, I think that's not a bad choice at all, the way it's operated. And if you say it's fun, I mean, you assess that more. But this would be brilliant because one thing that's super hard to motivate is to teach assembly. So in fact, that maybe looks like a very promising tool. Human resource machine is the name. And to bear that in mind.
Yeah, and that's available on Steam.
So what's the target user group?
I don't know. I think it was more designed as a game than a serious game.
Right. Okay. So but it's for anyone, or is there okay? Right. Because I could see that being used in entry-level programming easily to motivate, especially students that struggle with assembly, or whatever, to catch up using that, and then just okay. Now, how does that? Let's look at the x86 architecture and see how opcode map into the same concept, right? So it's a nice metaphor. Of helping that. Cool.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to play if you like problem solving.
And there you go, right? Efficiency challenge, complete in 37 of your steps. Right, cool, very nice. I think that's a really, sounds like a really promising tool, at least from a teacher perspective, because it points to the right direction. How playable it is, I can't assess, but nice find, interesting. Was it referenced in the survey paper, or did you find
it was,
right? Interesting.
But I already knew about it before.
Cool. Very nice choice.
Another one is more based on visual scripting. So I have videos we'll be able to run. I'm not sure. So that's about problem solving on visual scripting. That's the start. And it also teaches a little bit about machine learning, because you have to categorize stuff. And so yeah, it's very visual scripted based.
Cool.
And you have some kind of input, and you have to build a kind of AI to solve every problem.
Nice. Very nice.
And I think you also have some kind of progress because you gain money when you solve problems, and you can maybe buy new tools. And that's a lot. I haven't played it, so I don't know much about the thing apart from the player, apart from the trailer, sorry. But
Wow, deep learning. Okay, you can even model that one.
Yeah.
Neural networks. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think that's quite
Interesting.
advanced. I think some of the challenges in the game are very difficult, but it's a good way to introduce machine learning and visual scripting. I think so.
Definitely, definitely. In fact, I'm not sure what your impression or experience is. That I find the visual scripting, as it was for machine learning, is pretty much like using data mining tools, like if you used Clementine before or any of the big ones, or K-Miner or something. They basically do exactly the same thing. You have the data input, you clean the data, you extract the features, and and then you have various outputs. You put into reinforcement learning, decision tree modeling, or you want to have some sort of dendrograms or correlation and so on. Basically, it's all visual elements that you chain and together to develop those streams, basically, as they call them generally. So that looks very related. I mean, in fact, I was nearly thinking, okay, can you use it for actual problem solving? Meaning, like, I inject my data, use your tool because it has nice visuals. That would cool. I mean, at least as far as machine learning go, I think I could imagine that it really works well, because it's very close to what you would do anyway. The only thing that's slightly annoying is the name of the game, because that's pretty hard to find in Google.
Yeah.
If you type Wild to Learn, that's a really bad name for a game, I think. But anyway.
Yeah, that's
Interesting. So.
Then, so that's not really a game. It's more about framework. It was developed actually by French researcher called Plug and Play. So basically, yeah, I can try to show it to the website. So basically, you have it's more RTL based, and you have 3 games in which you have to basically code the AI and the behavior of the entities to win the game. And so they have the diagram explaining how it works. So basically you play through an IDE in which you can basically code, I think, in Java and C++. And then you can visualize the effects of your code in the game and on the behavior of the entity. And yes, I've done a lot of research.
Yeah. Okay, so is that? I mean, I would imagine you haven't run it, but would it?
Nope.
Do you know whether it works in real time? Is it like I'm coding and then compiling and then it visualizes, or is it how's the integration?
I'm not sure.
Because I struggle right now to imagine how that would work.
I think you have to program and then recompile the game.
Right.
And so I think it's more close to that. And it's probably still an ongoing project. So yeah, they teach you about 6 different. Well, you can use 6 different programming languages to use it.
Even Scratch.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
And I don't know how much it is the player is guided through the task he has to achieve. I don't know. I haven't found much information about that. But yeah, I think it was quite interesting to mention because it's quite different from the other ones, and maybe maybe in a educational framework, maybe university or stuff like that. You can use that as an example or an assignment.
Yep. Interesting idea. So basically, it's about visualizing, gamifying / visualizing programming constructs. So I see pointers down there, pointer campaigns. Right.
Yeah, I have a lot of things.
It's interesting also because the languages are so diverse, and not all languages have explicit representation of the different programming constructs, right? For example, pointers is a very C, typical characteristics, where in Java that's intentionally hidden, let alone Python and Scratch. I don't see any concept of pointers in Scratch. I don't think so, right? So I must admit I've never played. I just recall it's just dropping a lot of programming constructs on a very, very high level. Interesting. Yeah, it would be interesting to explore how they reflect those individual characteristics across those very widely differing languages, from very low level to extremely high level languages. Interesting choice, I must admit. So cool.
Yeah, and I think each of the 3 games is
for the evaluation, given that they have so much output, publication output, probably wouldn't hurt if you had a look at 1 or 2 of the papers and see if they did some evaluation and how they use it, and what conclusions they draw based on that one, right? So what do they have? They have experimental feedback. There you go. CS game programming practice. The second paper, the first one, meaning the youngest one, addressing teachers' concerns. So it's probably a response to previous insights they had. So it probably would be interesting to get a better feel about what it can and can't do, and where the shortcomings are as well. Because I mean, the problem with visualization is that if it's generically against pretty much any code that you can probably write, it's pretty much impossible to visualize it, right? Because you're not constraining the dimensionality and complexity of program, whereas your visual representation 3D is. So how does that mapping work would be interesting to see, or is it just such a constrained API that it simply just allows you to do, use a few constructs, I guess. I don't know. So it would be, especially since it's a development framework, so it aims more at the teacher to develop a game as opposed to the student to actually immerse. So it's up to the teacher to actually ensure that they get the game right, so students are interested, right? So cool.
Yeah. So next one is kind of similar to the last one. It's called Robocode, and very famous, especially in the serious game community, because that's very similar to the last one, because you have to the gameplay of the game is basically coding an AI to win the game, and this time in Java or .NET. And Robo Battle, just robot games. And so I did not run it, so I don't have any more visuals about it, unfortunately. But Netflix done.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Not sure about
so
this.
that was that's why I thought it was worth to mention. Next, so another famous platform called Coding Game, web-based, where you basically you solve coding challenges that have been published either by the community or by sometimes by some sponsors, and there's a lot of this is very interesting because there's a lot about competition, leaderboard, and basically you have a lot of way to compare with other players on your other users. For example, you have a whole tab dedicated to compete, where you have a lot of challenges where you can, for example, you have 5 minutes to solve a problem, and you're evaluated through how long your program takes to run and how many instructions you used and stuff like that. And it supports a wide variety of programming languages, basically, I think. almost every one of them, every single one of them. And everything is web-based. For example, if I say one lunch.
Merci à tous d'avoir participé au barbecue de dimanche. Félicitations à nos deux équipes seniors masculines et féminines pour leur match. Nous vous le dites.
So yeah, if, for example, for a single challenge, you have so short description of what you want to do, what's the input and what's the supposed output, and if you try to solve it, so that's basically the problem. And here's the scripting interface. And so here it's JavaScript.
Ah, right.
It's
Okay.
solve it.
So as a languages they support.
Yeah.
What else we have? Sharp, Dart, Haskell. That's quite a bit there.
Yeah. And I think it depends also on the challenge. Some challenges support more.
Rust as well. Kotlin.
Yeah, quite a lot.
Few exotics ones. So.
Yeah. And you have some test cases to evaluate your program before submitting it to everyone, and depending on how much test cases your program solves, you gain different points. And my profile, there's so say you gain some XP depending on how many puzzles, how many challenges you solved. So yeah, there's achievement, there is levels, there is also a way to have your rank in the community to see how well you perform, depending on what were your performance in the different competition. And they also host some AI competition where basically you must submit the best AI algorithm you can.
Cool.
And they make them fight the algorithm between each other.
Nice.
Yeah, very interesting.
Very interesting indeed. I mean, I could imagine that this is a brilliant preparation also for job interviews. No? Because if you take some of the more advanced ones and expose yourself to new languages, it's a quick way of testing your skill set, right? Because you don't need to, be bothered with the setup of different languages. You can just read about them, try them out immediately in a seemingly interactive way. So it's, wow, ambitious. Is that paid, this game? Was it free? Or
that's entirely free.
How is it funded? Because I would imagine it's a massive effort.
I think they have a lot of sponsors.
Right.
Because some challenges are sponsored by this business.
I see. So the challenges are contributed as to by outsiders, right? Yes. Interesting.
And so yeah, they provide some tutorials, I think, some programming stuff. I haven't looked into those actually. And you can also contribute by design your own puzzle, your own challenges, and submit them to everyone for everyone to do it actually.
Right. So you're playing this or you're participating?
Yeah. Every once in a while.
Right. Cool. I think that's a really interesting one. It's probably worthwhile.
Especially when I want to learn a new language.
Right.
It's really good to practice.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a very easy way of picking things up, or at least testing them out, right? So, cool. It's probably worthwhile linking that in the under your talk as well, like as an additional link, because it's just really applicable. I mean, practically. I mean, I see the immediate practical value for any student, really.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Nice. Good find.
Yeah, I started playing that almost maybe 4 years ago actually.
Right.
And so I don't know. Yeah, I only started playing it again like 6 months ago.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. Do that every once in a while.
Is there any scientific treatment of this? And is there other publications or people
I think
looking at
actually
that?
I think I saw paper on the research game.
Ah, right.
For example, this one.
Ah, right. Yes, student perceptions.
It's
Okay.
actually mentioned. Yeah, there is actually
Right.
a research team that is already linked. I didn't take this one because I wanted to find other paper. But
Yeah.
So it might have been discussed previously in the course. I don't know.
Yeah. That's right. So, yeah, I recall the discussion.
I haven't read through that, so I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to get a feel of what's, if you want to discuss this game in the first place in your report, then, because there's something that's citable, I guess. Cool. Interesting. Very interesting find.
Yep. And what else? Yeah, and the last game I wanted to present, so that's the game, the subject of the paper I will discuss.
Cool.
So CMX is MMORPG based, even though the MMORPG is quite so here's the very trailer showing how the interface looks and basically how far you can go. And so you have a little bit of scenario going on. So it has been designed like an MMORPG, but the interaction with some of the PNG are only there to perform questionnaire or problem solving.
Right.
Yeah, and if you succeed, reward that unlocks basically the next step in the game.
Right.
And so that's one of the challenges, which is basically you drag and drop the line of codes to do the right thing and to make the code work.
Yeah.
I wanted to fast forward through that, but yeah, and that's another challenge where you basically you have to write the code directly. That's the next level. And you have to feedback about whether the code is running well or not.
So basically a set of puzzles along the way.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a little bit later in the video, but I don't know why. But you can customize and basically redo the whole game in a separate interface that's dedicated to features. Here we go, where you can design the levels and basically set the interactions with the PNGs to basically design any programming problems you want. Yep.
Remind me, is it limited particular languages? What's
I think it's only for one. Yeah, it's only for C programming. For now, at least. And so in the editor, yeah, you can design what are basically everything in the game. What are the rewards for solving a problem? What feedback is given to the user? And yeah, everything basically.
Well, any thoughts about this game in particular?
Well, I have no idea why they call it an MMORPG. There's no online, like, none at all.
Yeah, there's no online.
Yeah,
You
that's
interact with something.
it's weird. Yes.
It's not even that much an RPG. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting one, what part of that, is the tools for the teachers.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
It feels. I mean, now it's looking seeing a video in particular. It kind of makes sense what it does, but it feels a bit 2000, right? So it's like from a visual appeal point of view.
Yeah.
I as a student, especially if as a novice student, novice programmer, I would not necessarily feel attracted to it intuitively. Right, compared to the other, we probably should have shown that first, and then the other ones afterwards to show.
Yeah, it feels
but it's, I must admit though, it's pretty extensive in terms of configurability, right? So I think someone really has spent time refining it, all the nitty-gritty bits.
yeah,
It's like I feel like the framework around is more impressive than
the game
perhaps
itself.
the game itself.
It feels more they should have used Unity because that's everything inbuilt, and then have some sort of standardized.
It was 2014. So
Right.
yeah, but still. Yeah.
But it's all Unity stuff, like visual programming as well. So it's like those blueprints.
That's not Unity.
No?
Blueprints. It's
Unreal. Sorry. Yes, you're right. You're reminding me. Yes, thanks. Yeah, but basically they're borrowing from all the game development engines or rebuilding them entirely.
Yeah.
Right.
For the design, range interaction.
Right. Then you have some sort of activity diagrams there. Yeah. Okay. Hui.
And they've not talked about that in the paper.
No.
Paper.
Yeah,
No.
that's something they didn't mention. That's why I wanted to present the game itself
Right.
for the paper, because
That's
there's a lot that didn't talk about.
quite extensive.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like there's a lot of infrastructure for, from a learning point of view for little game, right? So because they spend a lot of time on this constructing that kind of stuff, and I'm wondering if they could have better outsourced that into, actually using a game environment, focus on the evaluation and the game metrics, because that may just fall short in the game afterwards. And given the complexity, I think it affords a lot of testing to get the game right. Interesting. Interesting pathway. So wow, good overview
Yeah.
provided. I think we got a good understanding. And you covered kind of all ranges from
Yeah, it's right too.
from good to really good. So cool. Just as you were showing the puzzle, right? One of them was about dragging individual programming statements and so on. There's a quite reasonably influential approach called Parsons puzzles, and it happened to be developed from a former colleague of mine. She was using that in her classes, and she wrote a paper on that. It was very successful, and the idea was super straightforward. You take a functional working program, chop it into apart into statements or groups of statements exactly like this, randomly organize them, in worst case on paper, and then have the students organize them to get a running program, so that it's also a good mix of fun and learning. But of course it only applies to novices, or largely applies to novices. Well, you can make it arbitrarily complex, but sensibly it's used with novice programmers. So and that is kind of neatly embedded here as well, the way it looks. Cool. Shall we take a break first before discussing the rest? Because you have planned carefully for this one. The lecture will resume in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. So, as you suggest then, 11:20.